Good afternoon. I would like to thank everybody for coming to today's board meeting, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. We will start with the flag salute. Jake, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have any changes or additions to the agenda?
We do not tonight, thank you.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent?
I move we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, superintendent's report.
Achievement. Okay. Thank you, Board President Jones, members of the board. We're excited to be here this evening to talk with you about some achievement trend data, as the state has now released all of the final data from state assessments from last spring. And with me to help present this evening is Tiffany Gold, who is our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. And then you're up, sister.
So I'd like to thank the school board for giving us this opportunity to share the achievement data with you. We're going to start with a broad overview of the many assessments students participate in during their K-12 educational journey. The first table is showing that all the federal and state, all of our state and federal required assessments. So the first one, the NAEP, or the National Assessment of Educational Progress, is also referred to as the nation's report card. It is a representative sampling of students across the country who are assessed every 2 years in core subject areas. This assessment generally provides a national snapshot of student achievement over time. It's an assessment that is often referred to by the media and policymakers. It's the one you always hear about when they're talking about student data at a national level. It's usually the NAEP. And that is because it compares student performance across different regions and subgroups. And no individual student or school results are reported, so it's just that very broad report. The rest of the assessments in this table are required by a combination of federal and state laws and regulations. And there are two types of assessments in this set. The Smarter Balanced Assessment, or SBA for short, for English Language Arts and Math, and the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science, or WCAS, are summative assessments that measure student outcomes. This is often referred to by local media and state policymakers when they are looking at changing things or celebrating things. Individual results are shared with districts and families. The WIDA, the Washington Kindergarten Inventory of Skills, or WAKIDS, and the Washington State Early Literacy Screener are all screeners, and they are used to identify students eligible for additional services, such as English language development for multilingual learners. They also inform instructional decision-making for students in kindergarten or K-2, students showing indications of areas or areas of weakness associated with dyslexia. So those are the ones that the state requires us to do in order for us to decide what are we going to do to help these students succeed. So what do we learn when we have all of this suite of assessments? I'm not going to read these off because everybody loves that when you do that. But I did want to highlight each of the required assessments provides us valuable information about our students and our educational programs. They are snapshots of individual students' achievements that help inform decision-making at the state and or district level. And as a district, we learn about individual student achievement on grade level standards, and we also learn whether our current curriculum and instruction are meeting the needs of all subgroups of students. This is where we can really look into and learn about what are our opportunity gaps for our students. And we will be looking at those opportunity gaps in further slides as we go through the presentation. What else counts as data? There are many, many, many ways to collect data, and this is just a list that we're able to come up with literally off the top of our heads because there's so many. It's from our principals. This is just all of the things that we can look at. And while those other assessments are important, they're only part of the picture of student performance. We examine data from a wide variety of sources that are listed up here, and these include outcome-based assessments, screeners, diagnostics, as well as formative assessments, qualitative insights, and perceptual data. The perceptual data, I wanted to pause here because we use the Center for Education Effectiveness, Educational Effectiveness Survey, the EES, and we really wanted to take this time to encourage our staff, students, and families to complete the EES survey when it comes out next month. We're going to be launching it next month, so just a little plug. Why else do we look at the data? The variety of the data collected helps inform the district as well as building teams, building administration about overall program strengths and needs, as well as supporting our professional learning teams and individual classroom teachers in selecting instructional strategies, modifying instruction, and planning for interventions or extensions. So we take all of those data points to help with that planning. It all comes down to the bottom. What are we doing to help the students in the classroom?
I don't have my soapbox, but I'm going to stand on it for a moment and just say that all of that to say ultimately it's about equity for our kids. And if we're not looking at disaggregated data, we don't actually know how we're doing and if what we're doing is working for all different types of students. So we are going to be sharing a lot of disaggregated 50,000 foot level data today. That at the board level, that's kind of where we're looking, right? And so you can imagine as we think about all the different assessments we talked about and the types of data we collect, depending on where you are in the system, you're looking at a different grain size of data. So with all of that, we have to have an eye towards equity, whether I'm a teacher in a classroom and I'm just looking at the data for my 24 children, or whether I'm at the board and I'm looking at all 4,100 of our students, we're looking with that eye or that lens of equity. I always want to remind us when we're going to look at student data that we begin with assets and strengths because our children are not broken. So when we see that students are not performing where we need them to be, that's a reflection on us as the adults to think about what we're doing to help students overcome whatever might have been their situation to help them get to where they need to be. I also think it's important for us just to recognize we're always going to aim for a high bar because we're unlikely to exceed what the goal is that we set. And as we're getting ready to embark on a district strategic plan, this is a question that's going to come up repeatedly as you as the board think about those final goals and as we seek input from our community around those goals. If we want to set goals that are tied to specific metrics and percentages of performance, I always want us to think about if it's not 100%, which children are we choosing to say it's okay for them not to meet the bar? So I just plant that seed with you today. We also always want to make sure that we're leveraging the strengths that our students bring with them, that we're first looking at what we call Tier 1 or core instruction. What is our program of study, our curricular materials, are our assessments aligned in a way that allow us to measure what we actually want to measure? And so again, it's about really looking at the system or holding up that mirror to our practice as adults versus placing that on the students for their performance. All of the data that you're going to see here this evening, with one exception, which is some iReady screener data that Tiffany's going to speak about in just a moment, is all the rest of it's going to come from the OSPI report card. If you go to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Washington and you go under assessment, there is something called the state report card, and you can select Ridgefield School District and you can see all kinds of data for our district as a whole, which is what we've utilized to prepare for this evening. You can also go in and look by building. So if you have a student who goes to a specific campus in our district and you're interested in their performance metrics as a building, you can also access that information there at that grain size. The look of the report card has changed just a little bit this year. So for folks who are used to looking at this is just a snapshot of kind of that opening page. They always report the enrollment. They report the income, percentage of students at a low income status, our English language learners, and the finance attendance. But what's new is under this assessment. So on the left-hand side, it says foundational grade level knowledge and above, and it's blank. But right now, if you go there, they've already updated this since we posted it last week. There, you're going to see circles and measures there under that. And then on the right-hand side, consistent grade level knowledge and above. Why does this matter? So I want to just show you another snapshot of what it looks like. So now the state is reporting not just on the percentage of students who are proficient at the grade level standards, they are reporting students on track for college level learning without remediation, which is the metric we've been really using as proficiency. They've scored at a level 3, which is grade level standard, or a level 4 above. And now they're also reporting on students showing foundational grade level knowledge and skills, which includes not just the students at level 3 and 4, but also students at a level 2. Currently, students who scored a level 2 with some very small exceptions based on cut scores are not deemed proficient at their grade level. And when we get to high school and we're thinking about pathways to graduation, one of them is being at that college ready level for English language arts and mathematics. So it's interesting as we're observing OSPI add some new language to how they're describing, and to also call attention to the percentages of students by level. And you can see in the graphic there the percentage who are well below grade level at a level 1, but now you have this foundational, which is level 2, 3, and 4, compared to what has been our metric before, around grade level knowledge at 3 and 4 and advanced grade level knowledge at level 4. So I have no crystal ball, but usually when we start seeing OSPI dropping new language and reporting metrics in a different way, we can anticipate that there may be some changes coming. So we're certainly watching and monitoring as OSPI shares information out to see how this change in their reporting may be reflected in guidance or requirements for our district as we move forward.
So when they made that change from 1, 2, 3, 4 to foundational, and did they change where a 2's no longer a 2? They've changed that maybe 2's like what would have been like a 2.5, or is it still the same? Like foundational sounds to me like, well, that's pretty good, but before it was, well, actually a 2's like not there yet. So did they change the matrix to get to that point, or am I making my?
They haven't changed the cut scores at this point, but now they're using different language. So instead of saying basically you've met the proficiency or you haven't, which would be somewhere below grade level proficiency on the standards of that grade level, and now they're starting to say, well, you have some foundational grade level knowledge and skills. I think what's important for staff and for families to understand, students on track for college level learning without remediation is at a level 3 and 4. So regardless of what the state decides to do and how they choose to report that in the future, when students have foundational knowledge, that is not the same as saying they're prepared for college without remediation. And this has been an ongoing challenge and concern for decades of students going off to college and then having to take what we call 0-level coursework. I can't get into college level math at a 100 level, so I'm taking Math 95, which is probably the second year algebra course I should have done in high school for free. And now I'm paying tuition to take that course. And it's not counting towards a grade. It's not counting towards my degree because it's not at a collegiate level. So I'm watching with interest because there's some other things coming that Tiffany's going to share at the end of the presentation. But it's interesting to take a look at where we look at proficiency at sort of this 62, I can't go back, Danny, I don't know why it's not letting me. Nope, the other way. There we go. I just needed it bigger to see. So 62.3% at ELA versus 81.2%. And I have lots of thoughts and feelings about why the state might want to report in a different way and what people's perceptions of our school system might be. So I want you to know we're monitoring this, and I think it's important for families, if they're looking at the site, to understand the difference between those two scores.
Yeah, thank you.
So one of the questions we have always been following since we adopted the iReady benchmark assessments, which we take 3 times a year, we just finished our first round for the fall, is how well does it line up against Smarter Balanced? And so what we have pulled here is data showing school years from 21-22 to last year 23-24, the Smarter Balanced English Language Arts and the iReady Reading Spring benchmark to see how well they match up. And then the third column, that lighter orange one, is the difference between the two. So when we look at 22, 23, 23, 24, it's not a statistically significant difference. That's a challenging phrase to say. That difference is not statistically significant, and so we feel like this is a good predictor of how we will do on the state assessments, and so therefore using it as a way to monitor our students' growth throughout the year, we see it as a valid tool. The next one we're going to show you is another curiosity is how are we doing in comparison to the state? And so with this one, we're looking at proficiency levels 3 and 4. So we're using our traditional measurement for this one. And you can see that RSD is in the light orange, Washington State is in the white, and across the board, we do exceed the Washington State average. And I should back up a little. The Washington State is an average. Our percentage is our percentage of students. So there's a slight difference in how they calculate that. We consistently outperform the state, indicating a strong proficiency trend throughout student academic progression. The next set of data we're going to look at it in 3 different groups as we think about the comparison data. First, we'll look at gender, then we'll look at race, ethnicity, and then we'll look at program, and each time we'll be looking for the disparity between the two. So what is that opportunity gap? Where do we see an opportunity gap? This first one is language arts, and it is male-female, and we are looking at, I should say all the students are the top row, and then the bottom row, the orange is us, Ridgefield School District, and then the blue is the state average. So again, that slight difference between those two. And then the disparity is the difference between male and female. That's what that bottom disparity, how we come up with that plus 10%, plus 9.5. So you can see there that the female students outperform male students consistently, with the district showing a slightly higher disparity compared to the state. And then the next one we go on to, this time we're looking at race and ethnicity. And when we look at race and ethnicity, we want to make sure that the population, we have at least 100 students that meet that. So many of our subcategories, we don't meet the N, what they call meet the N. We don't have enough of that population to look at that data at a 50,000 level. So Hispanic Latinx is the one that we can look at along with our white students. So if you look at it, you can see that the district consistently performs better than the state across all years and all groups, but that there is a persistent disparity in performance between white and Hispanic Latinx students. However, in the past 2 years, we've decreased that disparity by 5.5%. If you could move the picture of the meeting over, we can see that final. There we go. And that is approximately a third of the 21-22 disparity gap of 17.8%. So the next one we're going to look at is by program. And by program, the first one we're going to look at is low income. Low income is determined by whether or not they receive free or reduced lunch. When we look at this one, we are looking at the comparison between the two, the non-low income to the low income, and you will see that the disparity between low income and non-low income students increased slightly in the district, maintaining a significant opportunity gap. I mean, you can see there at the bottom, that is statistically significant. The next one we're going to look at is still in program. This time we're looking at students who are students with different disabilities, and they are designated by having an individual education plan or an IEP. So students with IEPs in comparison to those without IEPs. And as you can see here, students without IEPs or non-SWD students consistently outperform the other SWD students in both the district and the state, showing a significant and persistent opportunity gap. While both groups show some variability year over year, the opportunity gap remains relatively consistent, highlighting the need to address this disparity differently. The next, that's all of the language arts. We're now going to move on to mathematics. It's the same thing. We'll look at gender, we'll look at ethnicity, and then we'll look at programs. So in this one, we're showing female and male on the math SBA, again, level 3, level 4. And the district shows, we show a shift from positive disparities favoring female students in the early years to negative disparities favoring male students in recent years. And we noticed that this change occurred during the COVID break. So 1920, I guess I didn't explain what 1920 was. I think we all know what 1920, but that is an interesting shift that has occurred. The next one is race and ethnicity. Oh. Do I? So with that, race and ethnicity for mathematics, proficiency levels 3 and 4. It's very similar to the language arts data. White students perform above the average, and Latinx students are showing a persistent disparity in performance between white and Hispanic Latinx. And then the next one is low income and non-low income. And in this one we see, again, low income students face significant opportunity gaps with persistent double-digit disparities. And then our final one for mathematics is students with IEPs and compared to students without IEPs. So we have students without IEPs are consistently outperforming students with IEPs in both district and state, showing a significant and persistent opportunity gap. And both the language arts and mathematics, we do see a decrease in the disparity after COVID. So there's while it's still extremely statistically significant at 37.6%, it is lower than it was in 17, 18, 18, 19, where it was at 45. So I'm going to pass it on next.
Okay, so board, you've seen a version of this trend line graph before, but for folks who are taking a look at it for the first time, and we've made some updates to it, this is the achievement data over that same 7-year period of time, We've added in the ELA and mathematics proficiency from last spring, as well as last year's. We're just waiting on the graduation, so that's why it doesn't have an uptick at the end. The state takes about 6 months to finalize graduation data. So when you take a look at this, it's giving you the ELA proficiency across our system. Just as a reminder, students are tested in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 10th grades. So this doesn't have kinder scores. This doesn't have WIDA testing, right? Those kinds of things embedded. It is simply proficiency on grade level standards in English, language arts, and mathematics at that grade level. And then we also included the graduation rate. So as you're taking a look, like from the start of the line on the left, it starts with the ELA proficiency. You can see that our math proficiency in 17-18 was lower because all of those lines drop. And then the graduation rate is substantially higher. When you're looking at this graph, the black line is the average of all students within Ridgefield School District. The orange line represents students who identify as female. The blue line represents students who identify as male. No political statement to not include gender X, but we did not, our N is so small that it does not protect the anonymity of our students' data, so I've not included it here in this public presentation. You can see the gap in the line in 1920 because we had no state testing. So in all those charts that Tiffany shared with you that had the gray column running down, that's because state testing was canceled that spring due to all of the school closures across the state. So we have a gap in data there. But again, you can see this over time where the proficiency percentages are and then where the graduation percentages are. Same exact data. This is broken out for 3 of our race ethnicity groups. The white students are represented by the red line. Our Hispanic and Latinx students are represented by the purple line, and our students who identify as 2 or more races are represented by the green line. The all students, again, is at the black line, and that's the average of all of them. So when we're talking about that disparity, you saw it in the charts, but as you look at the line graph, you're basically looking at the difference between that colored line and the average, or we could also look at the disparity between 2 groups. So for example, if we're measuring the disparity between white students and 2 or more race students, we're looking at the difference between the red and the green line at any point along that time. Yes, they are. Yes. Yeah, so there we can make some, I'm not going to say assumptions, but we could draw some conclusions that on average, right, we tend to outperform in language arts versus mathematics. But when we're looking at the measure of our students' performance up against grade level standards, that is significantly lower than the percentage of students who earn a diploma, which raises lots of interesting questions. This is the one my team knows I refer to as the heartbreaker slide. This one shows our all students again in the black line. And then you can visually see the difference between students who are identified as low income versus non-low income based on, again, participation in our free or reduced lunch program. I think sometimes there's a perception about Ridgefield and the population that we serve, and we are over 25% of our students qualify for free and reduced price lunch. So to put that in perspective, that's 1 in every 4 students may be struggling with food insecurity, housing challenges, the ability to have access to extracurriculars outside of school. And so if you think about, for example, a 2nd grade classroom with 24 students, that means 6 of the kids in that classroom may have some of those challenges in their life. Just again, to put it in perspective. So super important that we have the Family Resource Center here and the great support of partners like the Green Bag Project to meet the needs of our families in this community. Again, the gap is between the red and the green. Even more prominent is the gap between the yellow and the purple. The yellow line represents the performance of our students with different abilities, again, students who have IEPs or individualized education plans, as compared to students who do not in the purple line. So you're looking at the size of the difference between where the point on the line is yellow and where on the purple at any given achievement metric. Every single one of them, the purple far outpaces the yellow. And while we still do see peaks for graduation, it's significantly lower for our students with IEPs. I think this is still me. Okay. Tiffany's very professional with her cards, and I'm just like talking. So we also wanted to include for you some cohort trend. So often when we're looking at the data, we look at last year's third graders, and then we look at this year's third graders, and then we look at next year's third graders, which are technically different children. It's not really apples to apples. It is third graders to third graders, but they're not the same third graders. So we do sometimes like to also take a look at cohort trend. So you're looking at a group of students as they travel through the system. So just to acclimate you to this, I'm going to look at the sixth graders. If I go all the way over to the right, to the far right column, our sixth graders on language arts last year, 59.9% of them were proficient or above. When they were fifth graders and tested in the year 22-23, 63.5% of them were proficient. When they were fourth graders at the elementary in 21-22, 73.1% of them were proficient. And in their first year of state assessment testing, third grade in 2021, 66.8% of them were proficient. So I took you backwards through time, but you get a sense of this same group of students as they're traveling through the system. We don't have a tremendous rate of folks moving out of our system. So yes, there has definitely been growth and kids added to these populations over the years, but this still gives you a sense of our students who have been here, how they're doing. If we look at 10th grade, I'm trying to think, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah. So it starts with fourth grade. So we're just missing 1 year of data for those sophomores. So they were fourth graders in 17-18 at 74.7% proficient. Fifth graders in 18-19. They would have tested sixth grade in 19-20, but again, no state testing due to school closures from COVID. We come back, we tested again in 2021, so their seventh grade score, 21-22 is their eighth grade score. We do not test in ninth grade. There's a year skipped there intentionally, and then in 10th grade, then they're at 81.6%. And we tend to see this. There is this trend that they seem to be starting. If we could go back more years, but they're starting kind of in a little bit higher, and then we see as they're moving through the system, there's typically a drop somewhere in the middle school range, 5, 6, 7, and then we get to 10th grade, and then there's kind of a big uptick. So lots of wonderings and questions about that. I have the same data for you for math for just a moment, but this is this is third grade to third grade, so not apples to apples, it's third graders to third graders. So this is giving you the change over time by that grade level. So if I look at the third grade, it goes from that kind of bright blue all the way to the gray, and this does also give you a really good picture of when COVID happened, because there's a blank space, right? There's no bar there in the middle of it. So you can see kind of before COVID, we were higher, and then after COVID, it's lower. Kind of interesting looking at some of the trends. Like if I look at sixth grade post-COVID, it's lower, but it's been going up year over year, which is positive. 10th grade, same thing, it's going up year over year. So it's nice to see some of those trends kind of coming back, that there is progress being made. Mathematics, same data. So again, we're looking at a cohort of children from fourth grade for those 10th graders all the way through their 10th grade year last year. Those would be currently juniors in our system. The freshmen, you can see that's their third grade score. They don't test in ninth grade, so they'll test this year because those are sophomores. So again, you can kind of see a sense of how the scores go up and down as they're traveling through our system. Again, this is not cohort, not the same groups of students, but students at a given grade level. So again, you can see sort of before COVID and after COVID, and what do those trends look like? With the exception of 10th and maybe third grade, there's more variability than we see in the language arts data. Always want to have something to celebrate. So we do want to recognize and want to make the board and the community aware that Sunset Ridge, our intermediate school for 5th and 6th grade, was awarded from the Washington State Board of Education in partnership with OSPI and the Educational Opportunity Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee, because they wanted a really long acronym. They got an award for growth, and to achieve that, their students had to score in the top 10% in both language arts and mathematics. In this particular case, it was growth of our students who are identified for additional services through IEPs. So despite all of the disparity data we just looked at, this is a true bright spot, and a lot of credit goes to Principal Todd Graves and his team, and especially his special education teachers, but honestly, all of his staff are a part of what earned them this award. The awards happen for either closing gaps, growth, or achievement. And in their case, they were in the top 10% for proficiency in language arts, for math proficiency, and also, I believe, for language arts growth. And that's what earned them this award. So we're pretty excited for them.
This is our last slide, so we've almost made it to the end. Just some things that are happening at the state level. OSPI is in the middle of revising our learning standards right now. We are, if you look at the table down below with English, language arts, math, and science, we are in the 25, which means that we are now transitioning into learning about those standards. So this is a learning year for our staff. What are these going to look like? We haven't actually seen them yet. We should be seeing them very soon. 2026 has us has us starting to implement those standards. So it does align fairly well with our new ELA curriculum at the lower grades. We'll at least have spent a little time in the curriculum, and then the new priority standards will come out, and then they will be ready to work on that alignment work that will happen. And then you'll notice that there is a break, and then in 2028 is when they will, if they're going to make changes to the Smarter Balance Assessment, they will occur and be in place by 2028. And then in 2030, we start it all over again. So. Questions?
I got a question, Dr. Rodriguez. I just would like you to maybe share what you know OSPI would think, or what they would say when we think of, like, the biggest valley is the math scores, and then graduation rates for us are like 90% plus. What's the narrative or talk track between a gap of math proficiency that low, but yet graduation's over 90?
Yeah, this is not a Ridgefield problem.
Sure.
This is a challenge across our entire state, and I think you've seen OSPI respond in different ways over the years since the Smarter Balanced Assessment was put in place. We started initially with all kids must pass that 10th grade proficiency at a 3 or 4. Then the scores rolled in, and they said, actually, we're going to make the cut score kind of a mid-2, which is, I would say, is why part of why you see the jump in 10th grade is because we're cutting the score at a different place than we do at the other grade levels. Okay, so that's part of it. Then we still had a lot of students who were struggling to do that. We also had, we had an opportunity for students to have not just off grade level assessments, but to pass at a lower rate if it was part of their individualized education plan. That went away, so that's no longer an option even for students with recognized disabilities. And then you saw the State Board of Education, who is the body tasked with determining graduation requirements. So this is the players, right? We have the legislature who then tasks the State Board of Ed, but then you have OSPI who tells districts like us what to do. So there is some challenge about being in the middle of those dynamics. But then you saw the State Board of Ed say, oh, wait, we think that's not the only pathway potentially to get kids to graduation. We need to open it up and recognize that college isn't for everyone. I think there's some conversation to be had there around readiness for college, whether you choose to go to college or not, indicates a level of readiness for all kinds of things like apprenticeships and on the job and all of those things. But they've added now CTE pathways, so students have a number of 4 course sequences in career and technical education that can meet the requirement for pathway for graduation versus passing the state assessment at a proficient level. You also have students who, if they take a dual credit, so a college in the high school or a running start course in the content area, that can count. If students are not measuring proficient, they're likely to have difficulty in meeting that if they're doing like running start, for example. There's also a score on the ASVAB, so they've added that as a pathway. If you're looking at military service, there's a certain cut score. It is not, I would say the skills that are measured are not the same as the skills that are measured on the state assessment necessarily. Have I missed any? Oh, SAT, ACT, who nobody even cares about those anymore. SAT, ACT, which many universities have dropped, and now because they're realizing that they can't do admissions on a case-by-case basis for students, are now talking about bringing them back. AP, advanced placement, or we don't have, but international baccalaureate, any of those types of programs, if students get a certain score, that can count as well. So we've now created a whole bunch more pathways for students to get to graduation, other than demonstrating that proficiency on that exam, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that's why you're seeing a disparity between the state scores on the assessments and the graduation rates, because we have multiple pathways to graduation. There is only one pathway to proficiency on that state test, and it's performing on a state test.
Mm-hmm. Super helpful, thank you.
I would say that with the disparity data, first of all of our leadership team has spent time looking at this data very closely and planning their SIP goals based on this data. So trying to figure out, okay, what is happening? We've done, why am I drawing a blank on the root cause analysis on some of those data points? There's quite a few. So overall, we do see the trend that repeated over and over, that there is a large disparity gap for our Hispanic population, a large Hispanic or gap for our low-income students, and I should say opportunity gap. For those students, we are engaging in conversations, like you said, trying to figure out what is best practice, how can we start closing this gap. It is not as wide as it is for the state oftentimes, but there are a few areas that we have noticed. So we are learning from it right now. I don't know if you have anything more specific.
I would say that we're in good company. No one has solved this. There is no silver bullet. So you see the disparity across the state. You see it in the majority of districts across our state. It doesn't negate our responsibility to meet the needs of all of our students. So as Tiffany was sharing, we launched a revised school improvement plan template this last week with our principals and assistant principals. We have asked them to specifically look at the subgroups of multilingual learners and students with different abilities, because that is where we are seeing the most significant challenges. As you know, we're also launching a new strategic plan, planning phase first. And so this will be data that folks who come to various opportunities are going to see some of this data again. Because I think, again, from a root cause analysis, it kind of begs the question, what's causing that to happen? And then what do we change? What lever do we pull? Where do we nudge? I will say one of my favorite quotes is, the system is designed perfectly to get the results we are getting. So something about our system, and when we talk about systemic issues, something about our system is designed in such a way that if you are female, if you're white, if you live above the poverty line, and you don't have a recognized disability, you are going to do better. And that is exactly the opposite of our equity philosophy and policy. We want to get to a place where it's not predictive based on your subgroup identifications. So there's a lot to be done, but I think first step is recognizing, and I know that our principals and assistant principals were really grateful for the dialogue and just being able to give some language to what they felt in their gut all along. I think for some of them, this was like, okay, I'm not off base. We have something here we need to address.
While Paula is making her way up to the podium, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services, we have done some work together to develop a slightly different monthly financial report for you. And as you know, from your own finances, sometimes the bills come in after, right? So while it is almost October, we are paying the bills from August, which is in last year's fiscal year. So the report tonight that Paul is going to give us is kind of a blend of our prior report and where we're headed with our report, really sharing with you information from July, because we're still closing out August, which will then close out our fiscal year. So next month when you see her, it will be August and closeout.
Hopefully.
And hopefully the closing of the fiscal year from 23-24. And then you'll start to see at that point kind of the new slide deck that we're going to be consistent with throughout the year. So excited to have you see it and for Paula to share it and for us to get some feedback from you tonight.
All right. Well, let's get started. Oops. Uh-oh. Okay. All right. Well, that was a great segue, Jenny, or Dr. Rodriguez. We are going to start with a quick summary. At the last board meeting, there was a great update on our enrollment presented by Dr. Rodriguez. The enrollment, as some folks in the room know, drives a lot of the finances in our district. We're going to talk a lot about the finances and the impact that enrollment has. We're going to see some of the trends and talk about the impacts that enrollment has on the district. Looking at our count date, the first count date, which was September 4th in the school district, what part of our team does is we analyze the enrollment that happens in the district, and then we look at the financial impacts of that enrollment. And looking at the September enrollment, when we look at the components of enrollment, so enrollment, the individual students that come into the district and the categories and the grade levels of the students impact the funding of the school district in different ways. And when we analyze the components of enrollment, we were able to figure out that the net overall impact on revenues based on September would be about $450,000 on the school district's budget for this next fiscal year. And that actually was being down, we're projecting that we'll be down about 65 FTE for the year when we factor in Running Start enrollment. September, we don't count Running Start students for the year. We start counting them in October. So the enrollment report that you heard for the month of September did not include Running Start students. Running Start, we budgeted the year at 78 FTE. We're actually projected to have about 93 FTE starting the year. So that's actually a pretty sizable increase in enrollment in Running Start. And that is starting us off actually pretty good for that program. Looking at the trends in enrollment over the last couple years, 2021 was the year after COVID, or the year that we don't talk about. We saw a decrease in our district enrollment for the first time. 2021-22, we saw a big recovery. 22-23, we did see growth in enrollment over the district, and we did see something a little bit unusual in those 2 years with our district enrollment, where we saw our typical pattern kind of where we would typically, prior to those years, we'd see our enrollment kind of go up and then down at the high school, and then up at the lower levels. Those 2 years, however, we saw our overall enrollment kind of flatten or lay flat for the year. So while we were up, when you look at the pattern in our average enrollment for those 2 years, our enrollment was relatively, it stayed stable for those, throughout those 2 fiscal years. And then for starting the year for 2024-25, our September FTE count, not including Running Start, was about 4025. So that was a good start to the 24-25 school year.
I just wanted to
Yes.
acclimate the board on that slide.
Yep.
Because there were so many labels, it's not showing up for you at the bottom, but it's each month's count data. So the blue, bright blue on the left of each year, that's the September count. So you can see in 24-25 our September count data.
Yes.
The last bar in each year, that kind of red-brown color, is the average of the year overall. So you can see there's no difference for 24-25 because we only have 1 month to average, so it's going to match up there.
Yes. Thank you, Jenny. All right. So this next slide is looking at the budget in comparison to the average enrollment. So budget for 24-25, we budgeted enrollment at 4,063 FTE. We did have less enrollment that year. Our total enrollment was, when you count all of our programs, was actually 4,043, not including Running Start and Open Doors. Our enrollment was 3,950 for that year. So that year was a little bit less than what we had budgeted there. But you can kind of see the pattern going through the months. September, again, we don't count Running Start, but you can see the pattern as we went through the year. It was relatively a flat year, month after month. So now we wanted to get into the revenue. This is important, understanding how finances come into a school district, and this will be important when we get into how the cash flow works for a school district. So school districts, we have the bulk of our revenue coming in and primarily in 2 months, October and in April. Those are the months that we get our tax revenues from the county. And you'll see that on the slide here. The black is the actual revenues from 22-23, starting in September and going through August, which is our fiscal year. The blue is the actual revenues from the year that we're concluding, and then the 23-24 is the budget for the 23-24 school year. And you can see those huge jumps in the months there. What's happening in the rest of the year for a school district is we get about 60% of our funding from the state of Washington through what's called apportionment, which is that funding that's driven off of your student enrollment. And what the state legislature does is they don't give you that in equal installments. They give it to you in a formula that tries to break it up so that you're not getting, like in, for example, May and June, they give you less money, so that's like a 5% month. They give you 5% of your funding in May and 5% of your money in June. But then in July and August, they give you like 12.5% of your funding, and then August is like 10%. So they kind of divvy it out so that they're trying to equalize the impact and of your overall funding, knowing that you're getting a big jump in money in April, if that makes sense. So if you're a school district that doesn't receive a levy, that can have a negative impact on your finances if the state is not giving you equal funding every month. So that's something important to understand about how school districts receive their funding. And again, 60% of our funding is coming through the state through that formula that's not giving you equal money every month. And then about 14% of our funding is coming in through taxes, with the bulk of that is coming in April. About 54% of our taxes are coming in April, and then the other 46% is coming in October. And again, we'll come back to the revenue when we look at the cash flow here in a few minutes. So now let's look at our expenditures. Looking at the expenditure side of the house, our expenses are roughly equal every month. We'll look at the composition of expenditures in a few minutes as well. But again, the black 22-23, the blue 23-24. Expenses are a little lower in the month of September because we are doing accrual-based accounting or modified accrual. So some of our expenses that we're writing checks for in September are actually for the previous fiscal year. So it looks low, but because we're doing accruals to move money back to a previous fiscal year. And likewise, August looks high for that same reason, because we're moving expenses out of September and putting them in August of the previous year. So you see that, those fluctuations for that reason. Now in 22-23, that big black line, we were doing a large construction project, doing elementary playgrounds at Union Ridge and South Ridge that year. So we had artificially high expenses in that fiscal year because those two projects were going on. So 22-23 was a little bit of an unusual year for us because we had those large projects. But otherwise, you can see if you're kind of just looking across the 2 years, with a couple minor exceptions month to month, the expenses pretty much follow a similar pattern. We have a couple months in 22-23 where we may have a month lag with a partner billing, a partner being Chartwell's or ABM. If we get their invoice late, that'll shift, and those are large bills, so it'll throw off a month here or there, but otherwise the expenses are pretty even. Now let's look at the cash flow or the fund balance. So this is taking into consideration those revenues that we looked at, that aren't coming in on an even basis, and then looking at fund balance. That yellow line or that orange line is the board's fund balance policy. The red line is the actual fund balance and how it's changed over this past fiscal year. And the blue line is kind of what we budgeted, what we thought the fund balance would be throughout the year. And you can kind of see our fund balance has kind of followed that budget. But we're going to come back to the board minimum fund balance here in a little bit too. But you can kind of see what happens throughout the year with our fund balance. It goes up and down because our revenues are going up and down. And we're dipping into fund balance some months when our revenues are going down. And then we're increasing fund balance in those months like April. That big spike is April when our cash is coming in from the county. And again, this is important. We're going to come right back to that. Right here, we're going to come back to that. So there's interplay between fund balance and revenues. And we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. Fund balance is extremely important because it's basically your cash in your bank account, right? So our board policy is that we have 7% of our unrestricted fund balance, or our 7% of our budget be in unrestricted fund balance. 7% is not quite a month's worth of expenditures. What this slide is showing you is our monthly expenditures every month. That green line is your board minimum fund balance. Can you see where there could be a problem if our fund balance is lower than the board minimum? So this is just a visual of the importance of that fund balance policy right there. So we are consistently spending more every month because if you think about it, your district budget, if you divide that by 12, that's 8.33%, right? Our policy is 7%. So just looking at it from a math standpoint, it's the math ain't mathin', right? But this is just a visualization of what that looks like. So one of the things that our office does in the fiscal department is we have to monitor this to make sure that we have money in the bank when we pay payroll, because as a district, our money comes the last business day of the month. But before the last business day of the month, 4 days before that, we're issuing payroll via direct deposit so that on the last business day of the month, there's money in the bank to pay all the employees. So we have to float all that money. And then throughout the month, we're coming to the board and we're asking you folks to approve checks. So in your board packet, there's all these vouchers for checks that we're issuing. We have to have money in the bank before the end of the month to cover those checks, if that makes sense. So that minimum fund balance is very important, that we have money to cover or float those funds before the next month when we get our reload. So this is kind of the important part of the fiscal and the importance of that minimum fund balance policy, because we're always covering it's like your paycheck, right? Your paycheck is covering the next month's bills, right? It's the same thing with our fund balance. We're always covering the next month's bills. Yes, ma'am. So it matters when you're in a fiscal deficit situation. That's when you really need to know what your fund balance is. And right now, the district, when we look at our budget over the next couple years, the math isn't mathin' with our budget. So this is going to be very important. I would say it was never less important. Me being the fiscal person, I would say.
Math not mathing wasn't as concerning.
Paula's never going to be comfortable with the
Yeah.
math not mathing.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, like, there was some ESSER dollars. We saw, remember, almost 10% enrollment increase year over year, but that's not happening and has not been happening for a few years now.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of jumps give you big jumps in revenue that
Yeah.
help make up for that. The other thing that's happening is as we've grown, 10 years ago, 2,000 kids, today, 4,100 plus. You've increased the size of your staff, which means that your payroll every
Yeah.
month is significantly more dollars.
Yeah.
So just thinking
Exactly.
about, Paul and I have looked at it because I was like, do we really need 7%? Could we make it 5% to free up some? And she's like, no. And this is why. This is showing you why. We don't want to be in a position of like, ooh, I hope the state money comes through this time before people try to go to the bank and get their paycheck. We always want to make sure we're able to pay our staff on time.
Yeah. So this is really like just a visualization of the why, and you know, there's a lot of districts right now, and you'll hear about them. You're hearing about them right now, that are in a bad situation right now because the math wasn't mathing. And I think if they had a visual like this, I don't know that this would have helped them, but this is a good visual to kind of like look at and understand from my perspective. But there's two more things that I wanted to kind of share with the board, but that was a great question, Amber. If you guys have other questions, feel free to pipe in. But I wanted to also help or want you guys to understand the other two types of costs and what's going on with the other or the other costs that are going on in the district. So we have the non-salary costs, which are like the ABM bills and the bills that you see broken out in your board packets. Those have been those are relatively consistent month after month, except for that 22-23 when we had the playground projects going on. Those don't change too much month after month, and that is about $1 million a month. If you were to look every month, that's about what we spend, about 1.1, 1.2 for the year that we're just concluding. For perspective, payroll, on the other hand, that's the next slide. That can vary depending upon the month, and that has been averaging about 4.2 a month, 4.2 million. And that September's a little bit lower because we're accruing some of those extra hours back to the previous year. But this payroll is highly dependent upon several factors, like how many subs are we hiring? Are there extra hours that folks are working? In the summer, sometimes we hire extra help to help around technology, and maintenance may hire extra people. But payroll is simply the largest expense that we have. And we also have the paid leave program that is highly variable. And if we have more folks taking accessing that program, it can greatly increase our costs because we're hiring more subs and then paying benefits for the subs. So it really can really exponentially increase our costs. This next year, our payroll is looking like it's going to be about $4.6 million a month. So it's going to set a new record for Ridgefield for highest payroll. So, but that's kind of what you would see in a district our size for perspective.
Do you look at, I'm sure you budget for substitutes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, thanks.
Go ahead.
I know like you crystal ball, right, and how many subs we're going to need, but do you look at year to year on are we hiring more subs more often for longer periods of time? And I mean, because you're paying a salary and then you're paying another salary.
Yeah, I think the cost, to be honest with you, Brett, the cost that took us off guard last year, and we budget for higher sub utilization, and we look at it every month. Like every month, we look at sub costs. The cost that really caught us off guard was the health insurance costs for subs, because that just, once someone works more than 630 hours, they're eligible for full health insurance. And that's about $14,000 a year. And that's a cost that you just don't anticipate necessarily, because you don't know if a sub's gonna work that much for you. And that was really a cost that took us off guard. We budgeted for potentially 5 or 6 of them triggering that. I think we had like 8 or 9 of them.
Right.
And so that can astronomically increase your sub costs because none of that is funded by the state. But last year, I think we had about $1.5 million in sub costs, and I think it was about $120,000 of that is covered by the state. For perspective, it's grossly underfunded cost.
But also, I guess flip side good that we have people who are like more experienced subs,
Yeah.
so kids aren't losing, educational opportunities, I suppose, during those days, right? Like that.
Absolutely.
There's a cost for that too.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can try to be more forward thinking around that in budgeting moving forward, like anticipating some more longer, I guess, they're not a longer term sub necessarily, but like a sub who works for the district for more days in a year?
Yeah, I know that that's something that we look at every year. Yeah, I know that that's a consideration every year.
We can get back to you with some additional information on what we've projected for this year, but it's something, knowing that that's happening, that we may want to even increase what we set aside for that. It is wonderful to have people who want to substitute regularly. They get to know our kids, they get to know our staff, they get to know the procedures in the classrooms and playgrounds, and I love that we're able to provide health insurance benefits for them. What I don't love is that the state mandated it but does not provide any funding for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's all that I had. Any other questions? Those were great questions.
No.
All right.
Thanks, Paula. Appreciate it.
Okay. I have some more updates for you. Are you ready? Okay. I wanted to share with you and the community at large, we are taking a look at our one-to-one device policy procedure. Right now, our students, every student has a laptop that is designated and assigned to them. For our kindergartners, they have a charging cart available in the classroom. The computers stay at school, and when the teacher's going to use them in the class, the kids know which one is theirs, and they get theirs and use it and put it back. Right now, for our students in first grade, they get a brand new Chromebook. They have that. They take it home every day. They bring it back every day. It has its little case. I met a young man, I think last week, and he's like, "Why is this so heavy?" And I was like, "I know, bud, I'm real sorry." Little like first grader with the backpack, like, and he's carrying his laptop, and the very sweet Paris said, "I know technology's really heavy." So it's something that's interesting to observe our littles. I've also heard from staff and from some community members and parents, I'm going to say, that are curious about our current practice of sending home laptops for first, second, third, and fourth graders especially. So I wanted to collect some data, if you haven't figured out yet, data. So we sent out a survey to our staff and launched a survey to ask our staff, are you happy with the current process, or would you prefer to see carts at first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth and sixth that are intermediate, seventh and eighth that are middle, I didn't ask about high school because I think there is widespread agreement that our high school students need access to technology both at school and at home. And the results were interesting. I got 134 responses, which is pretty good return rate for us. That included 70 elementary staff, 24 at the intermediate and middle school, 15 from the high school, which indicates for you this is not a big concern of theirs, and 25 additional staff, including administrators, central services staff, all our alternative learning school, TOSAs, et cetera. In the results, 12%, just shy of 12%, 11.9% were fine with the current model. I could go back and track, but I could give you an estimate that that's mainly the high school folks that said that. 4.5% of our respondents would like carts at first grade to maintain kinder and first grade. 5.7% kinder first and second. 44% said kinder through fourth grade. So all of our elementary students. With carts, not taking laptops home, not having them on the bus, et cetera. 12.7% said we shouldn't be sending them home for kindergarten through sixth grade. And 20.1% said, I don't think we need to send them home for kinder through eighth grade. So if you combine the K4, the K6, the K8, that's telling you that 76.8% of our staff who responded prefer carts at the elementary, at the K4 level. So we're currently taking a look at our current inventory, our sustainability plan and long-term budget for technology, and considering a move away from having take-home laptops at our elementary level. That is certainly where we would start if we're going to make some changes. And so I wanted to let folks know that in our weekly update newsletter that Joe Weigert, our communications director, puts out every Thursday. If you haven't seen it, it comes to you via Parent Square. So if you have that set up to go to your email, et cetera, you get the weekly update. And this week in the weekly update is going to be a survey for parents and family members. So I just want to encourage our families to go. It's a very short survey. Just ask how you would like us maybe to update this procedure. And there's an opportunity to give any other feedback that you might like our cabinet and myself as a superintendent to be aware of. And then after that, I'll be coming back to you with some updates. So stay tuned on that. Couple more items.
Can I jump in there?
You sure can.
Thank you. Thank you. Like that's, I appreciate that we're
Yeah.
getting that and because like K4, do they even have homework?
Well, it's so fascinating you asked that because technically a lot of folks actually give some feedback about there's no research actually that shows that homework helps students achieve more at that age level. And in fact, some of our staff believe that we have a policy of no homework at that age level. So I'm still investigating that. But in general, K4, those little guys have been at school. They've done 6 hours of learning. That's 30 hours a week. I think they deserve to go play.
I just want to thank you for that and then getting this next survey out to the parents. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. And I think this is one of those items that I didn't feel like we need a committee and a year to solve. I think we can solve this faster. Okay, my next one, I have three things. So that was number one. My second one for you is around a land use hearing. So last week, a public notice came out. It was issued on September 17th, so that was a week ago, regarding a Type 3 application for an optional SEPA determination of non-significance and public hearing through Clark County. SEPA, for those that aren't familiar, stands for State Environmental Policy Act, which requires the county to determine if there are possible significant adverse environmental impacts associated with the proposal. A determination of non-significance means that any identified impacts can be addressed by applying existing Clark County code. So they're basically saying we don't think we have to go outside of code or get any special allowances. We think that this will work from the county perspective. The application is for property which the district owns and is located at 18216 Northeast 29th Avenue. It's within the Four Creeks neighborhood, and it is the proposed location for the 5-8 intermediate and middle school that was ran as part of last year's bond proposal. As you know, we've decided, or the board has decided, we're not running a bond this year, so we don't have plans at this time to build on that property. But the application was in progress. The district, just as by way of reminder, executed a developer extension agreement with Clark Regional Wastewater District on May 17th last spring for a sewer extension across this property, because we have developers that are developing neighborhoods and homes that surround the property that the district owns. That requires a variety of permits, including the required environmental assessment and evaluation. The board approved that agreement at the board meeting on May 14th, and interim superintendent Chris Griffith at that time was given authority by the board to sign the agreement. So I didn't realize that this was going to come out last week, so I apologize for not being ahead of this for both the board and the community. I have reached out to Clark County to verify when the SEPA application was filed and whether the filing covers both the sewer extension and the proposed 5-8 building. The current application is dated July 8th with full completion on August 30th. I did verify with County Land Development Office that if the project changes substantially, we would need to start this process over. So that's just important for us to be aware of if we chose to do something different with that piece of property. The hearing date is set for November 14th at 6:00 p.m. It is via video conferencing, and you do not have to have internet access, but you can connect to it by phone. What's more important is the closing date for public comments, which is coming up quickly. It's October 2nd, which is next Wednesday. So the public is encouraged to comment on the proposal, and all received comments are utilized by the county's staff to inform their report. So again, this is a county hearing and a county approval process, but it is regarding land that the district owns. You can also sign up to testify at the November hearing no later than noon on that date, November 14th. You can sign up at the community development website, and they also have a number available where you can submit testimony in advance via email with the case number, just to ensure that our families and community members have the opportunity to weigh in on this. We will be posting on our website tomorrow morning all of the information that I just shared, along with the web address, phone number, et cetera, where you can either submit testimony or sign up to give testimony. And we'll post the case number as well to ensure that everyone has access to do that. I anticipate I'll come back to you with more information, but that is what I had to share on that for today. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, so I will keep you apprised as I learn more.
I do have a question.
Sure.
No surprise. I am curious what the cost of this process to the district is.
Sure. I am still tracking all of that down, but I did track down the permits that were paid for in August related to this, and it was a total of $1,400. There were 2 different permits, both of them just over $700. Okay, and because I don't want to end on that note, I want to end by sharing that we have a new employee recognition program. It's an evolution of our Employee of the Month program. So that starts up at our next board meeting as our first Employee of the Month recognition. And of course, our Students of the Month. So we're very excited for that. We'll be unveiling new yard signs. Just wait, they're very cool. And then our new Employee of the Month, the way we're doing this is a little different this year. We've opened it up for any Ridgefield staff member to nominate any other Ridgefield staff member to receive this new award. And our staff got to vote on the name of the award. So the choices were Super Spud, Russet Royalty, the Golden Fry, or the Triumphant Tater. And the winning title was the Golden Fry. And so we will have nominees each month coming in from our staff. Our cabinet selects from those nominees. They all get a Golden Fry recognition. So I don't want to spoil the surprise and tell you what that's going to be just yet, but you'll hear about that soon. And then from those staff members, we'll select the Employee of the Month that you get to honor at a board meeting. And just as a reminder, those Employees of the Month then become finalists for our Exemplary Employee of the Year Awards, which we give out at August Convocation each year. We just launched the nomination form yesterday, and we already have received 15 nominees. So we're very excited about this. And that's my full update.
Thank you. I like the Golden Fry. That would have been my choice. Danny, do we have any public comment?
Well, we do, but she's going to be on Zoom, and we're having some technical difficulties with sound on Zoom tonight, so I just reached out to her, and she's going to text me her comments or email them to me. So if I get them before the meeting ends, maybe we could circle back and I could read them.
Okay.
Or I'll just provide them to you at a later time.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to old business.
Sure. So item 8A, old business, is approval of the revised board policy number 3122 for excused and unexcused absences. We had some good discussion.
Oh, we skipped that, yep.
Oh,
Just kidding.
Oh, thank you, Danny. One of the most important things here. Jake, do you have anything?
I'll just say thank you, Tiffany, Paula, Dr. Rodriguez, for all the detailed reports tonight. Super informative. Shout out to the Spuds. I see we've got victories in football, volleyball, soccer in the last week, so very exciting. And I'll be picking back up my office hours this fall. It'll be third Wednesdays at Bunny's, October 16th. Wednesday, October 16th at 4 o'clock is my next one. Hope to see you there. Third Wednesdays of each month, October 16th at 4 p.m., Bunnies. Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. Donna?
I would like to echo Jake's thanks for the presentations. Lots of information to digest there and unpack. I'm excited to hear about the new employee program, the Golden Fry. I don't know that would have been my choice, but I do like it. I do like it. I know. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Civil discourse from the board.
Right? Right? It's okay to disagree.
It's okay, all
okay
right.
to disagree, to have differing opinions. All right, thank you.
Amber?
So I had my first coffee talk last week. That was great. Had a couple of great conversations with community members, including one person who is interested potentially in applying for our board seat. So just a reminder and shout out to everybody out there who's listening or who might watch our recording later, that the information has been put out by the district that we'll be taking applications for the seat that's opening, sadly, because Emily is moving on. So that was great to be able to do that. I'm gonna be doing mine on the second Thursday of the month moving forward, at 8:30 to 10 a.m. at Lava Java, for our early birds out there. And I have those scheduled through December as of right now, and then we'll reassess and see if that's the best time for people to catch me. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I've already talked to one person that's, I believe, submitted their application for District 1, and it is District 1, and just so everybody knows, you have to be in that district to apply. But, it's better, than having an empty seat and having nobody apply. So we having participation is great. So thank you. And thank you for the reports tonight. Sometimes those numbers are not easy to look at, but they are numbers that we have to look at. And so thank you for both presentations, and yeah, this is where we start to move forward, you know, little steps, little steps. Thank you. Okay, so do we have public comment?
We do. Due to the technical difficulties, she emailed it to me, so I will be reading it. It says, "Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Trish Bisher. I am staff to the Clark County Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board. The Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board advises and makes recommendations to the Clark County Council relating to developmental disability issues and services. The board provides community leadership on improvement of efficiency and effectiveness of community developmental disabilities programs. Each year, the advisory board hosts the Disability Employment Awareness Awards. This year, the event will be on October 9th, 2024 from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Many of the nominees and award winners are former students of our local school districts. The awards honor the role people with developmental disabilities have in assisting us to achieve a dynamic, productive workforce and recognize the leadership of the business community. The event also celebrates October as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. The live in-person event will be held at Clark College in Geyser Hall, 1933 Fort Vancouver Way, Vancouver, Washington, 98663. The event will be live streamed, recorded, and aired on CVTV for those who prefer to watch at home. This is a free public event, though we are asking for registration so people know how many people to expect. For registration information, please email dd.program@clark.wa.gov or call 564-397-2130. That's it.
Thank you, Danny, for reading that. Now we are on to old business.
Okay. Item 8A, approve the revised board policy number 3122 for excused and unexcused absences. I see a typo, that's why I stopped. Is that the right policy number? It says high school graduation. Okay, hold please. We brought this to you last time. We had, I think, a great discussion about challenges with how we defined excused and unexcused absences. By way of reminder, the policy itself is more minimal. The procedure is where much of the debate lies. We are still asking the board to update the policy at this time to align it to the WASDA recommendations.
I move we approve item 8A as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
New business?
Oh, sorry. Now we're on to new business.
Yes, thank you. Item 9A is request to approve a trip for our Ridgefield High School cross-country team to travel to Boise, Idaho for the Bob Furman Meet. This is not long notice because the invite came to our team. This is an honor to attend, and it is happening this weekend. So we needed to bring that to you on a pretty tight timeline. They would like to take 16 runners. It's an elite cross-country meet at Eagle Island State Park. They are planning to utilize district vehicles driven by coaches. They would be leaving Friday morning, so students will miss one day of classes. They're returning to the district Sunday evening. It is mostly seniors, and this is really an opportunity to compete at the highest level in cross-country across the Pacific Northwest. So I know our students and coaches are anxious to have approval of their request.
I move we approve item 9A as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
And the next item I get to handle, just to reiterate, what Board Member Baker shared. We are sad to say goodbye to Emily Enquist and her role. She announced her resignation at the last board meeting. Her very last board meeting with us will be our next board meeting, so she will be at our next meeting on October 8th, where we will be honoring her. Even though she doesn't like that attention, we're still going to take the opportunity to thank her for her years of service on the board. Given that she's currently the vice president of the board, we need to make a call this evening for nominations for vice president of the board effective on October the 9th. So I'm going to make a call for nominations.
I would like to nominate Amber Baker for vice president of the board.
Second, if it requires.
And I'm going to call a second time, as I'm required to do so, for nominations. And I'm going to call a third time, as I'm required to do so, for nominations. Okay, and we have a nomination for Amber Baker to assume the vice presidential role beginning October 9th, 2024. Danny, could we please have a roll call vote?
Yes. Brett?
Aye.
Amber?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
And Jake?
Aye.
Wonderful. So our board reorganization is approved. And so beginning October 9th, Amber, you'll be taking on the vice presidential role. Just by way of reminder, the position for District 1 is currently open. The details are available on our district website or by calling our main front office. Those applications are open through next Friday, October the 4th. So folks have another week and a half still. It is not a huge application. It just requires a little bit of time and effort. So we encourage folks who live within District 1 and are eligible to apply for the position. At our meeting on October 8th, the board will be doing screening in closed session of those applicants. And we will be meeting at the following meeting in October to hold public interviews. Those are done in open session. So just folks know that we'll be doing that at our second October board meeting. And then hopefully swearing in a new board member at our meeting in November. So it's going to go quickly. We will also have board reorganization again in December, as per our policy. Every year we do that. So Amber, you have a glorious 6-7 weeks to be our vice president, and then we'll do this process again.
Dr. Rodriguez, is the positions like that, is that a WASDA recommendation or is that just a policy we've always done? Do you know?
I believe it's a WASDA recommendation, and it may even be a requirement, so I could find out for you. It's
No
pretty
big deal.
standard practice.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, we're adjourned. Thank you.